Well, welcome in, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mark Sandvig. I am the TL at KW Legacy Group Realty, flanked by Jill Jackson. Jill, how's it going?
It is going great. I'm dancing over here too, Mark, and you didn't compliment my skills.
Well, I'm sorry, Jill. Not everybody gets the love. Well, it is a dreary January day, and so you guys are all, you could be out doing better things, but thanks to the weather, you're in here celebrating some nerdy things. So we're here to nerd out a bit together. Before we dive in, Jill, remind us of who we are at K1. What is this whole conversation about?
Sure. So if you have seen this K1 floating around, many of you are like, what is it? What it is, it's a brokerage alliance. So this is a collaboration of the three market centers that are all underneath Jose Medina. And we have brilliant minds at each market center. And what we like to do is gather a couple times a month, a bigger event once a quarter. And it's a melting of the minds. And it's been great. It's been a wonderful opportunity for these three brokerages and beyond to network with each other. So I hope you guys just keep an eye out for everything we have going on.
I think one of the things that I love about KW, Jill, and I know you feel the same, is that there's no secrets in people's success, and our culture is one of abundance. It's one of sharing. It's one of, hey, if something's working for me, I might as well share it with you, because the pie is big enough for us all to win. So today's conversation is about just that. It's about how can we all grow sharper together? How can we all sharpen our swords to be the realtor of choice in the communities that we serve for more and more people in the coming year. Jose, are you here? I know it says you're
I
here, but
sure hope he is.
cannot see you.
I'm here.
Great, there he
There
is.
he is.
I was sweating for a quick second there. So what we're doing is Jose is driving the conversation today. He is a numbers nerd, and even if you're not a numbers nerd and a spreadsheet person, I want you to approach today's conversation through the lens of when I'm sitting down with a seller or a would-be seller, when I'm sitting down with a buyer or a would-be buyer, how can I communicate in such a way that helps them feel as though I know what the heck I'm talking about? And I think there are many people in this industry who speak in generalities. Oh, the market, it's hot. What the heck does that mean? And so our goal is to help you be able to speak better about what's actually happening in the market. Jose, why don't you pick it from here?
Cool. So I have called myself a numbers nerd before, and it's very weird to have someone else call me a numbers nerd, but I'll take it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The way today is going to break out is we're going to go over 4 different sections. So we're going to look at some national numbers, talk about some national sales, what the rates have been doing nationally, stuff like that. And then we're going to transition into local numbers and talk through kind of Northeastern Ohio, what we're seeing here, how that translates. And then we're going to talk about like kind of what do we think is going to happen in 2024? No crystal ball, but we're going to look at a couple economists and what they're predicting for the housing market in 2024. And then lastly, probably the most important part is what are some practical steps as a real estate professional? How can I help educate my clients and make sure that 2024 is a solid year for me financially, growth-wise, all of the things. What are the things that I should be doing? Knowing all of this information that's going on, where should I be doing and where should I be spending my time and effort moving forward? Cool. All right, let's get started. So this is the most recent graph that I could find out there that shows where we expect sales to end at in 2023. So on January 19th, National Association of Realtors will actually give their final, like where we ended at the year. But all predictions, everything I've seen is that we're going to come in at 4.15 million in sales. That's the amount of houses that have transacted this past year, right? And so I think this is a great graphic to like look at and understand, because that 4.15 right there kind of draw that line, that green line across to see what other years did that kind of look like 2023, right? And so if you look at that, that's 2008. Raise your hand if you were licensed in 2008. If you survived that market, that was the market, in essence, that we just came out of. Now, it feels very different. The circumstances, the economy, the amount of houses that were for sale was very different in 2008. The challenges that we had were very different in 2008. But in comparison, you can also see like, yeah, we had the same amount of transactions that happened in 2008 as what we did just this past year, which is kind of like a weird thing to think about. Because everyone refers to that 2008, 2009, 2010 as like such a rough time. And all of you that are on this call have made it through that, right? You have made it through this very tough transitional year that we just had. Anything to add, Jill or Mark, with that?
That's crazy to put in perspective, because I think we talk about '08 as just the real estate apocalypse. And the war stories. I wasn't licensed back then, but those who were, it's just it's wild to think that we just, if you're here and you're still licensed, you survived that year, even though we don't have a crystal ball for the future. So good job, everyone.
So this is a snapshot of what interest rates look like over the last 12 months. So it was not, to me, that looks like a thrill ride at an amusement park, but like rates were the story of 2023, and just how up and down and all around they were in 2023. We don't see that much movement in your typical 12 months. And so with that, we were on that roller coaster. Real estate professionals were on that roller coaster. Buyers were on that roller coaster of my rates today here, and then next week it's down here, and then the following week it's all the way up to here. And so we've just seen this very dramatic amusement ride, if you will, of rates that we all lived through in the last 12 months. We'll get into like what rates are going to do moving forward or what the predictions are, but it was a pretty up and down year when it comes to interest rates.
Yeah, and as we think about our consumers in the past year, there's a lot of wait and see, and understandably, like this roller coaster. When you're on a roller coaster, are you going to make a major life decision? And so I think this graph helps us to see why the average consumer said, next year, and Lord willing, stability helps to solve some of that.
So this, there was another slide here. Yeah. Okay. This slide here is one that I use on a daily basis when I'm talking to sellers. So again, we want to make this practical for you guys and how you can use this. This shows you, depending on how rates look, what the buyer demand is out there in the market, right? So you get into rates that were under 6, you're going to have strong buyer demand. That's also called like 2019, 2020, 2021. Like those are those years and how it lived out. And then as you go up, you're going to see buyer demand slow and slow and slow. I don't know if you guys lived through this and on this slide here, this was October and November. How many of us had listings that we put on the market or we were actively marketing in October and November, and it was like crickets, right? And we weren't getting any activity. And then all of a sudden, magically, right around Christmas time, when rates dipped down, I saw several properties that were like that, and they got multiple offers within a couple of days, right? And so this graph shows that, and I use this graph to be able to talk intelligently through it with sellers for them to understand like, hey, here's what's going on in the market. We're doing all of these things, and if rates are over at 7.5%, we're just going to have weaker buyer demand, right? And it's going to be able to kind of illustrate and show them that the market's going to go the way that interest rates go, right?
Jose, what are you saying to
I'm
the
not looking
people?
at chat. Go ahead.
We're monitoring the chat, don't worry. But what are you saying to the buyers, who are at the 7, like, hey, I'm just going to wait to see what rates do because they're hearing that they are coming back down? What do you say to that person?
Yeah. So that's an interesting concept. And the way that I have been explaining it is, look, you can buy at 7, let's say, and maybe there's hopes that it's going to go down to 6, but there's so much pent up buyer demand that when it drops to 6, that house that you were looking at may go for $10, $15, $20,000 more because everyone's jumping into the pool at that point. And so like, there's just going to be that much more competition. So do we want to get a better deal on the house and then refinance down the road? Or do we want to wait it out and be more competitive market when rates drop and I'm having to compete with 5 other buyers on this particular house? Because as this has gone, we have seen there's buyer demand there. It just stalls when the rates go up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the buyer demand's there. And if when rates drop, you're going to get excited, but every other buyer out there is going to get excited too about making an offer on that same house that you love.
Yeah.
I think we should all give Jose some applause. He acted like he works with buyers for the last couple minutes. And that was pretty good. So well done, Jose. Could have fooled me.
Everyone's smiling. All right. Let's so that was the national thing, right? So let's talk about local. And when I say local, I know we have friends in a lot of different counties on this call. I chose to pick the stats that we're going to look at and we're going to talk about. Those stats are strictly based on Stark, Summit, Medina, Cuyahoga, and Portage County. Just those. When we're done with this, I'm going to show you how to pull your own stats so you can bring that to conversations that you're going to have. But for this right here, it's those 5 counties and it's just residential. I didn't dip into multifamily. I didn't dip into commercial. We're just talking about kind of what most of you guys on here are like, this is where you guys focus at. So a lot of numbers, nerd out on that. So basically this is the number of houses that closed in any given month over the last 10 years in those 5 counties that we just talked about. To not like give it too many numbers to look at, let's focus on the bottom right corner, that 27,880. In essence, in those 5 counties, that's what sold this past year, right? Those are the number of houses that sold. You can then look at it and how does that compare in Northeastern Ohio? How does that compare over the last couple of years? So nationally, we are down about 18% in the amount of closings nationally. Not sure if anybody has a calculator that can do this, but can someone take out their calculator on their phone and take 27,880 and then divide that by 32,610? Who's brave enough to give me those?
0.85.
0.85?
Mm-hmm. If I did it right.
If we did it right. If there's a different answer on there, please put it in the chat, I guess.
We were down.
But so that means that locally, what's that, Mark?
We were down 14.5%, which is
we were down 14.
Same statistic just said inverse.
Oh, okay. I probably told him to do it the wrong way. So we were down 14%. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. So nationally, we're down 18%. Locally, we're down 14%, which if I had to guess, I would have guessed 10 to 14% because we're never as hot or never as cold as the rest of the US market, right? And so that's not that bad in my opinion. And it looks a lot like the 2014 numbers, almost identical basically. Any other comments or questions on that?
The only thing I would add really quickly is even though the year difference is 14.5%, I think the month over month, December to December difference is more notable. And so as later on, we'll talk about kind of agent count trends, what we're seeing, but December's always a little bit slower. Winter's usually a little slower. For the average agent to have sold a house fewer than what they're used to at an already slow time of year, I think means more people are kind of on the bubble as to whether they can pay their dues, that sort of thing. They're feeling the pinch more than the year on a whole would indicate.
Yeah, I mean, if my math's any good, which is questionable, December, it looks like that year, like December closings were atrocious, basically 20% down compared to the previous December, right? And I think that actually goes back to this, because you look at where rates were at in October and November, right? So less going pending in October and November means less closings in December. Right. And I think everyone was feeling that October, November, into December kind of concept. I don't know if we said this before. If you guys have questions, feel free to, if you're brave, unmute. If you're not as brave, feel free to throw it in the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I was licensed in 2018. So looking at some of these numbers from 2014 and 2015, my question would be, what were the rates at that time? Or why do you think, was it at the levels it was at 2014 and 15, for example, and then getting into 2016, 17, 18, and through 22? Why? I mean, obviously we know during the pandemic, the rates were really low and stuff, but like, why did that surge happen, or where was it before the surge and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would look at like 2015 through like 2018, maybe even 2019 as like more normal average years. I think a couple contributing factors happened in the, what I would say, unicorn years, which was 2021, even some part of 2022. You had interest rates really low. You had inventory really scarce. And then I think with the pandemic, there was just a lot of people that made home more of a focus. And
so I was involved in that, so that
to,
I know, but what about 2014 and before that? Like, where, you know, you see this, if it was down at that point, I mean, do you think that was still the tail end of like 2008 and recovery from that, or where was the shift that happened in 2014 and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've actually been, you'll see here on this next slide, we've been in a seller's market since 2014. So we'll talk more about that, but like,
okay,
that was like, we were starting the upswing in 2014, 2015, and then it kept going up, and then now it's went back down. But those are more like normal years, I would say.
So you feel like there was like a fault line at 2008 where it was a buyer's market, and then about 2014 is when it shifted back into seller's market potentially. Is that what you're saying? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So actually, we're going to talk about that now. So when this is the story of inventory, and this is what we're all really feeling is this inventory crunch. And so if you look at these numbers, they're pretty astonishing numbers. That right now, as we sit, we have 38. Well, at the time, this was at the end of December, you had 3,800 houses for sale. 3,800 houses in 5 counties. When back in 2014, 2015, we were at 11,000, 11,000, 9,000. Like, we're at a third, a fourth of where we were at in 2014, 2015, and 2016. Like, those are pretty astonishing numbers. And to think, like, as we were coming out of the pandemic, we still had as much inventory. Like, it hasn't really changed at all. Right. And this is 2020, looking at it, 39, almost 3,900. Now we're at 3,800. Like, it's not really gotten any better. So you're looking at, we're going to talk about months supply of inventory a little bit later, and I'll come back to this slide to kind of loop that around. Any insight, Jill or Mark, into any of that?
I just think it's astonishing that in 2014, we had almost 12,000 sales, and in 2023, 3,800. Until you see it like that, you don't realize how low the inventory actually has been.
Yeah. And so the question is, why is there so little inventory? And I think it really comes down to this is it's the mortgage rate block that we talked about, which is, you know, all of these people in the 3%, 3 to 4%, and even 4 to 5%, they're really thinking financially through their moves to say, do I want to give up my 3.5% rate and jump into a 7.5% rate or a 7% rate? You know, if you look at those just round numbers, 36 plus 19 plus 22, who's good on math here, who can help me? What was that? 36, 77?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 70%, 77% of the people that have mortgages have a rate under 5%.
Crazy.
So right, I'm sitting with sellers, and they have a $400,000 house, and they say, I want to downsize maybe to 250 because I want to start reducing my expenses. They're sitting on a 3.5% rate. We walk through the example with them, and they're like, my payment's exactly the same when I do this downgrade because of the interest rate that I have to take into effect here. Like, so why would I put my house on the market? Why would I sell? Given that scenario, I'm trying to reduce expenses. That's not going to solve the problem, right?
What are the equity?
That's
What are the equity figures? Sorry, what are the equity figures for this 78 something percent? Do we know where they're at? Because maybe some of those people would be cash buyers when they downsize.
Yeah, I think we don't have that slide, but I've heard very high numbers as far as equity, as far as how many people own their house free and clear, as well as how many people are have a lot of equity in their house, right? And I think the other part is that they just become some sticker shock, right? They went out and a house that used to cost $200 now costs $275, and they're just like, do I really want to spend that, right? And so I think there's just a lot of contributing factors to why we're seeing such a low amount of inventory there.
Jose, out of curiosity.
So let's talk about months of.
Oh, sorry. You are the listing guru. What do you say to them when you're sitting in their house and they're like, economically, it makes better sense for us just to stay here, even though it's way too much space?
I know this isn't the best like sales thing to say, but I say, look, I'm going to be doing this for the next 15 years. So I don't care if we list the house tonight or if we list it 2 years from now. I'm here to help you when you're ready.
That's great.
I'm not there to sell them on if they should sell their house right now. I'm there to like build a relationship, and when they're ready to do that, I'm going to be the person that they remember, that has stayed in contact with them, been touching on them through my database, or all the different client events, all the different things. And then when they're ready, I'm the person they'll call back. And that's not very salesy to
No,
like get them to sign on the dotted line, but like that's just who we are. That's how I operate.
mm-hmm.
Can I hop in there real quick? Because I also have an objection handler to that one. Bigger houses are much more cost for maintenance. The utility bills are higher, and just the cost of a bigger house is more money. So downsizing will reduce their bills as well. So is that something to look at? And we've been having some success with that, because you're paying to maintain a bigger yard, you're paying to maintain a bigger house. Like, are you heating a house that's 1,000 square feet too big for you? And if you get granular with them, sometimes they decide, yeah, you know what, it probably isn't going to cost me any more to downsize, and they move forward. Just food for thought.
Yeah, and it's not even always financial too. That's a good point, Tracy. Like, it's not always just financial. It do you want to have this 2-story that you only use 4 of the rooms out of the 9 that you have, right? So like there's a bunch of different reasons outside of just financial. And my mind goes back to like a conversation I just had with the seller a couple weeks ago, and that was the conversation I had. Was like, it doesn't matter when you do it. I'm here to help you, and I'll take your referrals in the meantime. Cool. Chris Mascarino has a question.
Hey, I just wanted to come back to somebody asked a question about equity in the homes. So I have the data here. 70% of homeowners right now have 50% or more equity in their homes, and 40% own their home outright.
Thank
So-
you.
You're welcome.
There you go. Next market update is going to be by Chris Mascarino. Cool. So let's talk about months of inventory, because I think this is the story that a lot of sellers really need to hear, and actually even a lot of buyers need to hear, which is, are we in a buyer's market? Are we in a seller's market? And I've heard some kind of uneducated agents talking to their buyers about the market and like, oh, we're transitioning into a buyer's market. And I'm like, I don't know how accurate that is, but let's have a conversation around that. So here's how you, if you don't know this is super helpful in a listing appointment and a buyer consult to talk through this stuff. But months of inventory is how we determine where prices are kind of going, right? Are they going up? Are they going down? It's all supply and demand, basically. So basically what you do is you take the number of homes for sale, divide that by the number of homes that sell every month, and that gives you the months of inventory, okay? So for example, I have 100 homes for sale, 20 houses sell every month. That means I have a 5-month supply of inventory, right? So there's some debate around going, what's a buyer's market, what's a seller's market. I can tell you if you're under 3 months of supply, you are definitely in a seller's market. If you're over 6 months of supply, you're definitely in a buyer's market. And everything in between there is probably more like a balanced market. So I go through all that to say, if we have 27,000 houses closing, I need someone to do the math here. 27,000 houses that close, and we only have 3,814 houses on the market. How many months supply do we have? Feel free to throw it in the chat. Number of homes for sale, 3,800. I can't see the chat, so I don't know what people are saying.
No one's answered yet. And it looked like Mark had it on his calculator, so I didn't do it.
Looked like Mark was getting down with the calculator. Just come up with Mark.
Struggling with it here, but it's
Okay.
a lot. All that to say.
3,814 houses for sale. But, yeah. I should probably do the math before I jump on here. And 27 divided by 27,000.
Can I say something else?
Yeah.
So, like, also, it seems to me, I mean, aside from the rate situation, like freezing a lot of people in place, it feels to me like the boomer generation is maybe vacating their homes at a later age than the previous generation for other social factors, like a lot of them having their adult children still living with them, or maybe they're helping their adult children financially still, or things that maybe weren't as much of a factor in the previous generation. I don't know if you guys feel that or see that too, but that seems to also be a factor. And then my second question is, because of the scarcity, it feels like there's a builder boom trying to address supply and demand right now, or trying to rush to meet that scarcity. And, you know, how do you guys think that's going to affect things coming forward as those come online and available?
Yeah. I'll go back to, let me go back to my question that I answered, and I should have done the math beforehand. You're at, so I'm going to show you how I did the math. 27,880, divide that by 12. That means 2,323 houses sell every month. And there's 3,814 houses on the market. So it's about a month and a half supply. So going back to the original conversation of it's not in a buyer's market. It's not even in a balanced market at this point. We are 100% still in a seller's market. And it's not as crazy of a seller's market as what it was, right? That was like red hot. This is just really hot as the seller's market. So instead of it selling in 4 hours, I may need 4 days to sell it. right? And so it's different extremes, but it's still 100% in a seller's market. And I think there's just agents that I've came across that are, you know, they're sending over these low offers and they're like, oh, we're in a buyer's market. And I'm like, no, we're not. I just want to make sure that we're educated, we're educating our buyers and sellers around this.
And just to jump briefly, I think, yes, it's still squarely a seller's market, but many people who are thinking about listing their homes right now have friends or family who sold in 21 when there was 10 days of inventory. And so, you know, many of us, I'm sure, have still had to sharpen our skills as it relates to having expectations conversation. It's probably not going to sell in 5 minutes. It might take a couple of weeks, and that's okay. That's still a good market. And if you're not prepared to have those sorts of conversations, that is a skill you need to be sharpening, because even though it's still a great market, it's not as absurd as it was a year and a half ago, but your sellers may or may not know that to the extent that you should.
Right. Yeah. I think going back to the other question, I definitely will say that I have seen more multi-generational options when it comes to housing, right? Like either I'm not going to sell and I'm going to move my adult family in, or we're going to combine households. We're going to sell these two households and move into one. So I think a lot of that contributes to some of the pent up supply issues, and just there's a lot of factors that kind of go into that for sure. Cool. Let's go over this. So this form is something that I don't go on a listing appointment without. Unless you've been trained directly by me on how to do a listing appointment, I'm not sure if you've ever used this form. So I'm going to just walk through how I use this on an actual listing and how I talk to a seller with an actual listing in this. So we just got done saying it's still a very good seller's market. And I use those numbers based on 5 different counties, all different price points, and it all is very local. And when I say local, it depends on the school district, depends on the price point, depends on the kind of house. And so while we can talk about numbers on a high level, nationally, even in the region, it really comes down to like you sitting down at a seller's table and being able to explain what their market is doing. So this is something that I pulled. It's Lake School District, which is an area I work, $500,000 to $750,000. So I pulled this and I said, MLS, tell me how many active, how many sold. I want to figure out like what's going on in this market. And so right now, currently, there's 6 houses for sale between 5 and 750. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, in the last 6 months, there have been 8 houses that have sold. So using that supply and demand, that means I know that about one a month is selling approximately, and there's 6 people in line trying to check out in front of you with 6 active houses, right? And so while the media may say one thing, another realtor may say something else about the general market, this is actually what's going on in your price point in your school district. So we're actually in this actual scenario, we're not in a buyer's market, or we're not in a seller's market. We're basically in a balanced market, right? And so being able to explain that on a very local level as you go into a listing appointment, in my opinion, is what can separate you from the competition, right? If they're going to interview 2 or 3 different agents, being able to provide this kind of insight into it and not like, oh yeah, the market's great, I just sold a house. That's not really telling the seller really what they want to hear. They want to know like the numbers and actually what's really going on. The average time on market for that price point is 43 days on the market. So now we can set proper expectations, right, around how long this house may be on the market. We also know that out of these 8 houses, not one of them sold in 30 days. Right? So like we better set different expectations on this appointment than if I'm in North Canton on a $225,000 house. That's going to look completely different, and I can have a different conversation to have better expectations conversation and have like a more thorough, like, here's what we really should expect. And I can guarantee the other realtor that you interviewed did not go over that with you. Right? Any questions on this? Or is this like super boring to people?
One question, Jose. You might have said this, and I'm sorry if you did. Were you pulled 500 to 750? What do you think the house you're going into, like, what was the average that you would list it at? Like 600? Like, how far of a span are you giving for price?
It depends. It depends on like where I think I'm going to be pricing the house at, and like let's say if it's a 250, I'm not pulling a $250,000 price increment. Right, I'm
Right.
just not doing that. It's probably if it's a 250, I'm probably pulling 200 to 300. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to get a general feeling of what that market's like. If it's a 200, I may only pull 175 to 225. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on the market. It's going to get tighter as the price goes down.
And do you always go by the school district?
I do. I don't know if that's the official right answer, but I always go by the school district because I think that's how people look a lot of times. Is they don't say I want to go into this neighborhood most times. They want to say, hey, I want to look for something in Rocky River School District or whatever. And so we always pull that, and we always limit our comps to the actual school district. Do we want to look at how, I don't know, I can't tell the read of the room right now if they are like, this is like super boring and who does it stuff, or they're like, yeah, that's really good and I want to learn how to do it myself. If you guys are like, let's go on to the next part of this, I can skip this part of how to pull your own stats. So I just need some feedback on if this is good information or not
Show
good
us how.
information.
Yes, please. Yes, yes, yes. Everyone says yes.
Yes,
No.
please. Definitely show us how to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna minimize this. All right, so, all right, everyone can see my MLS screen? Someone say yes.
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 Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna go in, like I'm pulling, I'll change up the school district now. Let's say it's Medina School District. So my own last name. Medina School District. So I do active, contingent, pending, pending expired, and sold. And you can change this if you want to do 400 or 365 days, you can do that. If you want to do 180, you can do that. I'm going to do on single families, and I'm going to do, we'll do 300 to 400,000. Okay. So I got all this information. I'm just going to hit result at the bottom. Check them all. And this is the very first part of a CMA. This is not like, I want to start with the big part of what is going on in your school district. And then I'm going to drill down and we're going to actually look at comparables, but this is going to set the stage of the temperature of the rest of the comps that we're going to talk about. We're going to click on them, we're going to print, and then you're going to go right here to MLS stats. There you go. So again, Rachel's on this call, I believe. She can talk through this in her sleep because she's went over it so many times with people to help them understand how to understand their particular market. Cool. I love this part right down here. I hope everyone can see my cursor. I love this part right here because then we can talk about not every house sells within 30 days. Like in this one, there's 76 houses that have sold. Only 14% of them sold within the first 30 days. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're telling me we want to sell in the first 30 days. That means we got to price it so we can move it in the first 30 days because 85%, again, my math saying 85% of them did not sell within the first 30 days. Right? Inevitably, then what happens is everyone asks the sell price to list price ratio. Why is that higher as we go on? They may want to take a stab besides Rachel Hogue. They may want to take a stab at why that is.
Price reductions.
There it is. Yeah, they're like, why is that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you just dropped the price after 30 days, $15,000. So you got 101% of the new price.
Right.
Right. So being able to walk them through that is like super critical.
And this is great. Mark mentioned setting the expectations, because I do agree, even if a seller, their friend sold 6 months ago, it's a different market than it was 6 months ago. And that is the answer and explanation to all the expectations you need. That's great.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So let's talk about what we think 2024 is going to look like. This is not Jose's predictions. This is not Jill and Mark's predictions. This is like going out, researching, seeing what a bunch of different organizations say. And so this is what the experts are saying what we think mortgage rates are going to do in the next year. And so what I like about this source that I used was it took Fannie Mae, it took MBA, and it took NAR, and it combined all three of them to say, what's the average? Because some people are going to be optimistic, some are going to be pessimistic, and maybe some of them are right. But this is kind of what to maybe expect. Who knows? I mean, these are all predictions. But like this, potentially what 2024 could look like with interest rates.
And
Any
regardless of who you're looking at, Fannie, MBA, or NAR, they're all trending the same way. They're all the numbers are different, but and I think we all feel this, that yeah, the end of this year, I think most of us would be surprised if the interest rates aren't lower than where they are today.
Yeah. Again, all predictions. This one I thought was interesting. So this is home price. What do all these experts, we'll say experts, think that home prices are going to be doing in the next 12 months, right? You can see people from being very optimistic to people being somewhat negative about where prices are going to go. And if you average it all out, it's at 1.5%. Right? Not much difference. Not going to go up, not going to go down. I mean, it's just going to be kind of stagnant with pricing. If we've seen a lot of price appreciation over the last couple of years. I'm not sure we're going to see a lot of it, at least in the next 12 months, right?
And Jose, just
a lot of things could change. Yeah, yeah.
These are national numbers, not Ohio specific numbers, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And again, like, good thing about Midwest is we don't go as high or as low as other people, right? So if they're predicting 1.5%, I mean, it's going to be pretty flat for the year, I would say, with pricing. Yeah. This I hate the way this graph looks, but it's helpful. So this is, I'm trying to make sense of all of these numbers on here. If you pay attention to the green, not the shaded part. So the shaded part is new construction. The non-shaded part is just existing home sales. Okay. So they are predicting, this was prior to the numbers coming out, 4.1 to 4.129 in closed transactions throughout the US. That was the first slide we hit, right? 4.1 in closed transactions. This is their prediction for this coming year. Anywhere from 4.1 to 4.3 is kind of what we expect. We don't expect 5, we don't expect 6 million in sales. And I don't think we really expect less than where we were at in 2023. I mean, for all intents and purposes, we're talking about rates being maybe better this year, and the prices being around where they're at, and probably the amount of transactions being around. Again, all a prediction. And then you can look from 2025 how it starts to build off of that. Right. Knock on wood, hopefully, I've been telling my wife this, I think maybe the worst is over. And that was October, November, and maybe December. I don't know. But all of these people that way smarter than I am are saying that next year's going to look a lot like what this year was, but less validity or less volatility in the market, in the interest rates. All right, we're almost done with my boring slides. The one thing that we have started to see change, I don't know how people feel about this, NAR for the first time, like in the last month or so, reported that membership, the amount of licensed agents, has dropped 1.7%. First time that's happened, I think it's been like in the last like 6 or 7 years. Like it's been a long time since we've seen any drop really in the amount of realtors out there. Now, the one thing I'll say is everything going on with NAR and some people leaving NAR, like there's that whole conversation. So maybe those numbers may have affected that a little bit. I don't really know. Again, I didn't look into it that closely, but we have started to see a little bit. I think Mark and Jill, even on the new agents coming into the business, that's probably slowed a little bit in the last 6 months. Wouldn't you agree?
No question.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think the thing that we have to understand with this, and this is my only Gary Keller reference of this whole day, is the law of equilibrium, which is in the Shift book, which I preached to Mark and to Jill a lot over the last couple months about. But the law of equilibrium says the amount of available income in a market determines the number of agents that are going to be in that market. Makes sense. There are more income out there. There's going to be more people that flood to the real estate market. As the media says all of the bad things about the real estate market right now, you're going to see a fall of the number of agents out there, if that makes sense. And there's always a lag, right? There's a lag of both of those things happening, right? As I was kind of thinking through this, I was thinking like, well, okay, that makes sense. We're going to start to see a lag. There's going to be some people getting out. There's not as many sales, blah, blah, blah. But the interesting thing about that is it says the amount of available income. So think about that. We talk a lot about the amount of transactions, right? But the amount of transactions isn't what bases our income off of it. It's amount of transactions times the volume that we sell, right? And whatever the commission structure is. So like, this is the closed volume, again, of those 5 counties over the last couple of years. So yes, we were down, but we were down more in transactions than what we were in volume.
Right. Which
also means that there's more GCI that went out into agents' pockets, right? Because it didn't drop 14%. I think if my numbers were accurate, it's around 10% is when it dropped. So yes, there's less transactions. Yes, it feels very different. Yes, it's competitive. But the amount of GCI that's still being paid out and the amount of volume out there isn't as extreme as the 18% that we're seeing across the United States. Am I making sense with this?
Yes. Something I love with
good news or bad news.
I think something to think about, Jose, is you talk about agents getting out of the business or new agents coming in, which is absolutely the case. The advantage of that to everybody on this call is, we're looking at 2022 to 2023. As the market's going down, if you can even maintain where you were at, you're actually gaining market share in that time. And if you can gain market share in this time in a shifting market, you won't lose that market share. So just to shed a little hope to everyone out there.
Yeah, I think it's exciting times for sure. I mean, I think before you could list the house and you didn't need to have a lot of skill behind getting it sold. And I think as things sit on the market, those with skills, those with communication skills to hold on to their clients, those that are working their database, it's a very exciting time for those people. Yeah. So do you want to transition, Joe, Mark, into this next section of some ways to be kind of putting this to practical use, and like, what can we do to make sure that we're not following the market with what the market's doing, but we're actually getting market share?
Absolutely. So a couple skills I wanted to touch on with you guys, and essentially they're both social media related, obviously, as you can see here. But gone are the days, yes, your listing presentation is still very important, but the message we want to drive home is for everybody to be super aware that your presentation today is made up before you step foot in the listing appointment. The way social media is, they have already essentially interviewed you. They've probably pulled up reviews as well. So with that, like, just be very aware. I think it's good to post personal and business, but be sure that when they go to your page, especially Instagram, Facebook is good. Everyone's on Facebook, but it seems for business related dealings, people are going to Instagram more. So if you don't have an Instagram, first off, get one. And secondly, when they're going to your page, do they understand what you do and how are you selling yourself? So I pulled a couple people. One was an agent, Ken Pozek. If you don't follow him, I highly recommend you to. And he also kills it on YouTube. And then just a friend of mine who's local happens to recently, a couple years ago, she got into interior design and has absolutely blown up. And what is familiar, or what's similar with both of their pages when you click on it, is you see what they do, their bio's filled out. There's a link in their bio. There's a website you can go to, as well as like the story highlights. I think these are awesome. I also think stories are a great way to communicate with people. But even saving these, I'll tell you their names, Arnita, in just one second. Even saving story highlights here in these circles, you guys should, maybe you could highlight, for example, North Canton or Solon or Strongsville, areas that you sell in, and maybe homes or a year, however you want to do it, but utilize these story highlights. So when people are interviewing you before you actually step foot into their home, they can see what you've done. So that's one thing to absolutely keep in mind. And Arnita, to you who asked, this is Rhine Revisions. Jessica Rhine is her name, and then Ken Pozek. He is an agent in Orlando. What's super cool about Ken Pozek is, not that this is supposed to be a call about other agents, but what he did really great is he moved to Orlando knowing nobody. He's actually from Michigan, and he's one of the biggest agents in Orlando, the biggest agent as far as the YouTube presence goes. He's wonderful. So if you think, oh, I'm not from here, I don't know people here, look at what he did on social media and YouTube, and it's what he's built his whole business on. So, I mean, just be very aware. I hope that your Facebook and your Instagram reflect who you are as an agent, because people are going to be looking. And then in addition to that, I would just say, and then I'll give the mic to you, Mark, is with social media, as important as it is, I was on a call yesterday that they said this, and I kind of agree, not that there's anything wrong with using it, but don't solely rely on stock images when you're posting on social media. Like, Canva images are great, but why you don't want your whole feed to look like that is because, one, you're raising your hand to the algorithm saying, hey, I'm trying to sell something. So you're going to go lower on people's algorithm. So that's super important to be aware of. And also be yourself. Like, we all have a superpower in this business. We all have something that makes us great in this business. So if your whole Facebook feed or your whole Instagram feed is based off of Canva images, that's great, but people want to know who you are as well. They want to be in business with people they know, like, and trust. If you're funny, be funny. You don't have to be the most well-versed person on video. They just want to connect with you and they want you to be you. I've shared this so many times. A couple years ago, I had posted a video that had nothing to do with real estate. I had read a Brene Brown book and I got more leads from that one video. I'd gotten 3 leads and closed 2 homes who connected with me from this video I had posted. So just the more you can be yourself, the better. And for the sake of time, I'll stop, but that's my social media input. Mark, passing the torch to you.
Just a couple of far less interesting things. If you were on this call, then you've already checked points 1 and 2. So good job. Just go put them into action. So knowing your numbers, being the local economist of choice. I think Jose demonstrated beautifully that he doesn't sell, he educates and informs, and he, guides people to the decisions that make the most sense. Knowing your numbers enables you to then have the right types of pricing conversations, as he demonstrated with that fantastic MLS statistic tool. Creating healthy urgency through questions. So that isn't designed to force people into doing something they don't want to do, so much as interrogating the assumptions that they have about the market. Oh, I'm just going to wait until X to do Y. Well, do you think that you're the only one with that idea, Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Being able to help people make the decisions that make the most sense through questions, because they think like the news tells them to think. Or in urgency, it's not getting them to sell or to buy necessarily, as to make decisions based upon reality and what happens there. One note, I know we talked earlier about the amount of equity that people have in their homes. Chris, that statistic was fantastic. 70% of homeowners have more than 50% equity in their home. 40% of homes are owned outright. That's real opportunity. Our job, regardless of whether someone's looking to buy or sell, is to be the person that they think of when they do. And so to conduct an annual home equity checkup, whatever you want to call it. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'd love to meet with you at some point in the next month or 2 to help you understand what's going on in the market, as well as what you have on your hands as it relates to equity. It's a value touch and a good reason to be in touch with your people, many of whom have lots of equity. And then the final quick note is that even though perhaps we've hit the bottom, I'm talking with a lot of agents, and some of whom are top producers, who, hey, if I'm used to selling 3 and I only sold 2, my finances aren't equipped to handle this. And so I'm passionate about financial wellness. I know Jose and Jill are as well, and there are others in our world who can be a resource. But if you're living a 3-unit a month budget and you've been used to that, and suddenly you have 2 or 3 months in a row of 2 units, I don't want people getting out of this business or making knee-jerk reactions in their business because their financial house isn't in order, which has very little to do with selling homes and far more to do with being dialed in financially. So that's more just a plug to dial that in, not because you're not going to sell more in 2024, but because we don't have a crystal ball. And if you have a month or 2 that are slower, we don't want you to have to knee-jerk and panic. Those are my fire.
Mark, I'll add something into that, because something that I'm very passionate about. And Tracy's on this call, so she knows how passionate I am about agents and their financials and being healthy with that. My recommendation is always do a 5-year average of your income and budget off of that, because 5-year average takes out the really good years, takes out some of the bad years, and set it off of that. I just see so many people increase their budget, increase their lifestyle based on a year or a 6-month period of having a hot hand, if you will. And man, just be patient with that. Go use the 5-year budget, go off every 5 years what you have and adjust from there. And you'd just be happy you did it. It'd be a lot less stress in your life. Speaking of stress in your life,
Thanks for the segue.
All you, Jill.
Yes. So, as we started this call, we talked a little bit about the K1 network. One of the events we are doing this quarter is actually going to be down at Gervasi Vineyard. It's going to be a great class, and it's partnering with your partner. This is even a passion project of mine. I 6-7 years ago got into the real estate business, and everything changed. And I think when we're in this business, we want to, you want to go all in, you want to say yes to everything, you want to grow fast, but that takes a lot of time. And a couple years ago, my husband ended up getting his real estate license. And although he still has another job, he does love the business. And it has been really cool the way it's strengthened us, and not saying that your spouse or partner needs to even get their real estate license, but what this evening's going to be about is in what ways can they be a part of your business? In what way are you guys working towards goals together? We're super excited. Mark, if you even want to tell them about Jonathan Holmes, if we have time, if not, it's okay.
It's not all real estate. It's going to be a blend of, we're going to have 3 couples who are working in real estate together, sharing kind of how they do it and what they're learning and the joy and challenges that are there. We also have a friend of mine who is a very skilled counselor talk about kind of what skills can we build, not just to win, but to win together. And it's going to be at Gervasi, so it's going to be a great time. So please plan to attend. I know that QR code was there. You've gotten emails about it. It's on social media, but sign up now because we need to get Gervasi our numbers soon.
By the 18th. So
Here you go.
time is of the essence.
It's
Jose,
3:00.
thank you so much for being with us today. You always, like, everyone knows Jose is like my biggest mentor. We learn so much from you every time you're on. So appreciate all of the
Yeah, and it was exactly how we planned it. It's 3:00 exactly. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to stick around. We'll be around for a couple minutes to answer them if you have anything. Thanks, guys. Good to see everyone.
Thanks, everyone.